Now I want to take a quick break and share with you this idea of updating our model at a different point in time than when we are typing. So what do we mean by this? At the moment when we bind an ng model to our form, we can then start typing, and as we start typing we then see this being reflected here. If we then undo those changes, everything then character by character is then rendered for us in the DOM. But let's say we don't need to reflect all of the changes all at once. It might be that we have another requirement where we are typing in an input and we don't want to keep searching on a back end perhaps. Think of, for example, an autocomplete feature. But at the same time, do we need to keep updating our model behind the scenes? Probably not, at least in the most cases. So what we can do alongside our ng model is specify this property called the options. So we have these ng model options that we can then pass an object to. So you can see here that we have ng model. I can then hit enter, and we then have this ng model options object. Now you can see here that when we hover over it, we don't really need to do things like turn to the documentation now, because we can just read the source code and interpret what we can do. So here we have this options object, which we're basically specifying on our ng model options. So if we don't want to pass a name in here for whatever reason, perhaps we are dynamically rendering our inputs or there's a specific use case, then we can provide a name in here instead. We also have this standalone, which basically removes that particular input from being tracked inside of our ng form. So if you want an input to be there, but not really there, we can essentially detach it from our ng form. But what we're focusing on here today is this update on. So let's first pass in an object, and we're going to say update on with a capital O, and this is then where we can then pass in some options. Now if we click through, you can see that we have update on. In the source code, we have this. Update on defines the event upon which the form control, which is this, value and validity update. So it's not only going to commit the value to the form's model, but it's also going to trigger the validation. So this defaults to a change event. Possible values are change, blur, and submit. So let's have a look at blur, seeing as change is our default. So let's pass in via a string, update on blur. We'll then hit save, our application's recompiled. We can then say testing, and what's interesting is our name here hasn't even updated. So when we click on an input, that then fires a focus event. When we click off or use a tab, this then fires a blur event. And I hope you were watching there, you can see this name has then been committed. We'll do it again and off click instead, so we can say testing and then off click. Name is then committed to our overarching ng form value property. So the default for this is the change event. We also have the blur, and we also have the submit. So if we were to say testing, skip this out, we can then press create, and you can see that yes, underneath the scenes, our validations have been triggered as well. But I hope you also noticed that our model of name of testing has also then committed at the same time. So this is a really nice feature, and I am sure that you're going to have a use case in the future where you want to delay that updates for any kind of reason. And this is also going to stop Angular just working in the background. So it will give us a small but worthy performance boost for a nice one-line piece of code. Now what we can do is just simply leave this as blur if we like, and I think we'll leave it there for this lesson. So with this in mind, I'm going to show you another feature in the next lesson on how to trigger a form state reset, which is then going to allow us to reset this entire state object, essentially clearing out all of the fields.